been a little over a year since Seth Rich, the IT director at the Democratic National Committee, was murdered on the streets of Washington, taking 3 shots to the back. Now, a private detective employed originally by Mr. Rich's parents has come forward to say that his sources in the DC Metropolitan Police tell him that the laptop seized by the DC cops proves that Seth Rich was in touch with Wikileaks. Indeed, at the time of Mr. Rich's murder, Julian Assange, the director of Wikileaks, offered a $20,000 reward for the apprehension of Mr. Rich's killers. Yet, for 10 months, the DC Metropolitan Police has turned up no leads in this highly political murder. In fact, the detective who has come forward to say that the computer that Mr. Rich used has evidence of his connections and communications with Wikileaks says that he was told by a number of high-level officials in the DC police that they were told to stand down. It is extraordinary that the murderer of Mr. Rich has not been apprehended. When I raised this question in an interview with Michael Isikoff of Yahoo News, he thought I was a conspiracy theorist. He saw nothing strange about the murder of the man who headed the division from which the documents were hacked that proved that Hillary Clinton and Democratic National Chairwoman Deborah Wasserman Schultz had colluded to cheat and steal the Democratic nomination from Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, it is essential that President Donald Trump order the FBI to take over the investigation into Mr. Rich's murder. I want to know who murdered Seth Rich. Don't you?
Hello everybody. So some crazy news just happened recently, and it has to do with the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. Now, Seth Rich was actually, I believe, the head of the IT department at the DNC, which is actually a really crucial position considering that they will come in contact with all of the emails going in and out of the DNC's server. Now, the first article I want to share with you guys is by Fox News, and this was on May 16th, 2017. The family of DNC staffer who was gunned down on July 10th on a Washington, D.C. street blasted reports that he was a source of emails leaked to Wikileaks. Now, Rod Wheeler, a retired Washington homicide detective and Fox News contributor investigating the case on behalf of the Rich family, made the Wikileaks claim, which was corroborated by a federal investigator who spoke to Fox News. Quoted, "My investigation up to this point shows there was some degree of email exchange between Seth Rich and Wikileaks," says Rod Wheeler, former DNC homicide investigator. Wheeler told Sean Hannity the investigator, quote, "came across as very credible. When you look at that, with the totality of everything else that I have found in this case, it's very consistent for a person with my experience to begin to think, well, perhaps there were some email communication between Seth and Wikileaks." Now, the interesting part is that the family also has a spokesman who I guess handles a lot of the media questioning and all that stuff on the various news networks that are covering their story. Now, whether that spokesman is a somewhat forced application on this family or if it's a voluntary choice by this family is the question. But a spokesman for the Rich's family, on Tuesday said, and his name is, I think his name is Mr. Bauman, he said that Wheeler was not authorized to speak for the family and called assertions that Seth Rich sent emails to Wikileaks unsubstantiated. Brad Bauman, which is the man's name, the spokesman for the family, even said if purported emails were to surface, it would not necessarily mean Rich had helped Wikileaks. Quote, "Even if tomorrow an email was found, it is not a high enough bar of evidence to prove any interactions as emails can be altered, and we've seen that those interested in pushing conspiracies will stop at nothing to do so." So this is interesting. So the spokesman that works for the family who lost their son, who represents the family who lost their son, is pushing a narrative of conspiracy theorists that stop at nothing to do so. So this is my first red flag. Is, you know, this man already is a well-known DNC PR specialist, someone that's supposed to, you know, when crises happen at the DNC, are supposed to either cover them up or help mitigate the damage in publicity. So the article further goes on to say, although Bauman said Wheeler was paid by a third party, the family is named as clients of Wheeler's capital investigations on a contract signed by Rich's father, Joel Rich. So it seems that a voluntary contract was signed between Seth Rich's family and this private investigator, Mr. Wheeler. An FBI forensic report of Rich's computer, generated within just 96 hours after Rich's murder, showed that he did make contact with Wikileaks through Gavin McFadden, a now deceased American investigative reporter, documentary filmmaker, and director of Wikileaks, who was living in London at the time, the federal source told Fox News. So an anonymous FBI source had told Fox News and confirmed these reports by Wheeler with his own intel from the inside. On the investigation side. Now, the interesting thing is that Gavin McFadden did die recently, and I don't want to go too far into speculating as to why, because the official reason is it was just cancer. But they have a lot of technology these days that can make deaths look like a whole lot of different causes and completely lead people off the trail. So with his death showing up in such a timely manner after being contacted by Seth Rich, it's just really interesting to me. So take note of that. This FBI anonymous source that talked to Fox News was quoted saying, "I have seen and read the emails between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks." He said the emails are in possession of the FBI while the stalled case is in the hands of the Washington Police Department. Now, the interesting thing about the Washington Police Department is that they do not have the best record of investigating things. They actually seem to be covering up a lot of things. And those who are following the whole Pizzagate, Pedogate narrative and a lot of the research behind it also know this. The police chief is very buddied up with Mr. James Alefantis. And after even allegedly finding child porn on Comet Ping Pong's server, which was emailed to the police then decided to do nothing with that information. Now, WikiLeaks has decided to issue a $20,000 reward for information leading to the conviction for the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. Now, WikiLeaks never came out and said this is their source, because legally that would be a disaster, but they did imply such, and the fact that they are offering $20,000 for the reward of information leading to the conviction of his murderer just shows that this implication is based in reality. They're putting their money behind their mouth. Now, that's basically what was said in that Fox News article. Now, the interesting thing is that there is this divide between the private investigator hired by the family, by the dad, who was on papers signing a contract with this private investigating firm. There's a divide between this man that is the private investigator and then also the spokesman for the family by the name of Mr. Brad Bowman. Now, I suggest for you guys to all research his name and look into this guy because he does carry water for the DNC, and they do not have a very nice track record at the time. Now, another article by W&D goes into the story of Seth Rich as well. And something interesting in their article, I'm going to go ahead and read it here. In an interview with Business Insider, Bauman, which is the man that is the spokesman, the DNC spokesman for this family, blasted the media for suggesting a DNC connection to Rich's conspicuously timed death. Quote, "It's sad but unsurprising that a group of media outlets who have repeatedly lied to the American people would try and manipulate the legacy of a murder victim in order to forward their political agenda," Bowman said. "I think there's a special place in hell for people like that." That's interesting he said that too, because if he is in fact guilty of manipulating the legacy of this murder victim, hence impeding on this investigation, then he's exactly guilty of what he's saying others are guilty for. Now, Detective Wheeler said that Rich's parents seemed genuinely concerned about finding out who their murdered son's murderer is. However, he believes their disregard for the possibility that Rich's death may be related to leaked emails and his line of work at the DNC is alarmingly conspicuous, which I happen to agree. The interesting thing is that, from the surface, it almost looks as if they are disagreeing with Wheeler's reports, but in essence, it's the spokesman that is working for them that is kind of speaking for them at the same time. Now, we have no knowledge of who's been threatened, who's been, typical mafia tactic of not speaking out and threatening someone, standing over the jury is an example of this. They could have easily been told to stand down as a family, and instead, disobeyed those mandates and hired a private investigator. And now we have this whole story because we have two conflicting sides of the story that all seem to tie with the family. So something's not right here. Now, Seth's brother said to me, this is a quote by Detective Wheeler, the private investigator. Seth's brother said to me, "Rod, we do not want you to look at this aspect of the emails." And I asked him, "Do you want the case solved? You cannot tell a detective, don't look at certain things. If you want the case to be solved, that detective is going to look at everything." Wheeler continued, "I don't know the reason why they pushed back so much on the idea of the emails. I think that they may think that if the information gets out, it may taint Seth's legacy." What legacy? He's dead now. I mean, what's more important at this point is my question. Continuing on. "I am just speculating. Why would they even care? As long as the bad guy is caught, does it matter how it happens? I don't know what the reason is. It's peculiar. If it were my loved one, I wouldn't care about the legacy. Let's catch the bad guy. We'll worry about the legacy later." Exactly. So the investigator really is painting out this idea of wouldn't you just want to find the killer of your son rather than impede on that investigation if there's new leads and new findings, even if a man wasn't given permission to speak on his findings? You should at least follow the findings and the facts where they go. I think any family would be incentivized to do that for the death of their child. Now, with that being said, why are we to believe that the word from a spokesperson that was appointed to serve this family and tackle the narratives in the media, why would we assume that this guy is actually representing the family and their intentions? All I can assume is he represents them, and this is what he is saying, and therefore he works for other people, and I'm sure they have very weighty directives and opinions when it comes to his operations and covering all this up, possibly. Now, Wheeler goes on to say, "I've been hitting the ground out there talking with people, typical things we do in a homicide investigation. I haven't found anything to support the theory that this was a street robbery," he said. Now, this is really interesting to me. This is actually one of the biggest and most crucial points of the investigation that I find has tons of anomalies in it. It's a little bit similar to how when people look at the death of Vince Foster back in the day in the 90s. A lot of people just said that his death was a suicide, but the evidence actually points to otherwise, it being a murder and a cover-up. Very similar to this is what I would say. Now, in this article by InfoWars, it actually goes back to July 18th, 2016. And this is an initial report titled, the headline, "Seth Rich disappeared for almost 2 hours before he was murdered." This is actually a early report after all of his death came out in the news. "The mystery behind the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich has deepened after it was revealed that there was around an hour and a half of unaccounted for time between him leaving the bar and being shot dead." Rich was shot in the back in Washington, D.C. on July 10th. The apparent victim of an attempted robbery, despite the fact that no possessions were taken. Last week, Wikileaks' Julian Assange appeared on Dutch television and implied that Rich was one of the sources of the DNC email leak. Rich visited Lou's City Bar, on the evening before his death and began drinking heavily. He left at 1:45 a.m. and headed to another bar called Wonderland, which closed at 2:30 a.m. that night. No other bars or clubs were open at this time. The 1 mile mark from Wonderland to Rich's Bloomingdale home would normally have taken around 30 minutes, possibly a little bit longer if he was drunk. However, police didn't hear the gunshots that led to his death until 4:19 a.m., leaving a gap of nearly 2 hours between when Rich would have left Wonderland and when he was shot dead. What was Rich doing in the time between leaving the bar and walking home? Last week, I wrote an article asking why Brad Bauman, which is the DNC crisis cover-upper, a crisis communications manager for the Democratic Party, had been hired by Rich's family to act as their spokesman. So why exactly would he have been hired as a spokesman? Could the family not speak for themselves? What reasons were given, or what reasons could be speculated as to why the family was not permitted to speak for themselves in the media? Bauman's first reaction was to insist that people stop questioning the unsolved circumstances behind Rich's murder. This is so counterintuitive to a murder case. Why would you actually have a call for an action for people to stop asking questions? It's a terrible idea, and it looks really bad. After the article was published, I was contacted by a prominent source close to the Democratic Party who didn't want to be named for obvious reasons, but said that I was, quote, on the money with my reporting and that there was a cover-up taking place. If this information comes out and the killer is revealed, or there's unquestionable evidence that there was no robbery that happened, which there already is, if this becomes more published, this could possibly break the entire back of the DNC, and specifically as it relates to emails with John Podesta. Talking about making an example out of leakers in the DNC. Now, I'll go ahead and show you this email. It's a little ominous. And this also brings back, it makes someone think of, the death of Andrew Breitbart, the death of, Seth Rich, the death of Mr. Vince Foster. Counsel in the White House. All these things happened in Washington, D.C., and it is very probable that there is a criminal organization in Washington, D.C., like the mafia, that is colluding with political organizations and politicians alike, and becoming this conglomerate of a crime family in D.C. that is most likely keeping a lot of police officers, including the police chief, from investigating very, very important things, such as the Comet Ping Pong incident, such as this incident. So I wanted to bring this report to you guys because I want to ask the question, what do you think about Seth Rich? What do you think about the story that surrounds his death? What do you think about the fact that, it's officially on record that it was a robbery, shot in the back twice, but his $2,000 necklace and the money that he had on him and his jewelry wasn't stolen, his wallet wasn't taken. Nothing was taken other than his life, which the last thing that brings into question is this thought for me. If you have a hitman, let's just say you have someone who kills someone. Let's say they kill someone, but their goal is to make money. Now, killing someone, normally you don't just make money default, unless someone orders you to kill someone and they pay you to do such. Now, if it is a robbery, and it isn't, and we know that based off the fact that nothing was stolen as far as property from Seth Rich. He was just gunned in the back twice, and that's all that happened. What would be the motive or the incentive for this person that is just shooting this person blatantly? They're not profiting off of any money. They're not getting any money specifically from the body of Seth Rich. Is not just a random robbery in that instance. If anything, they might be getting paid by a criminal organization that has hired a gun to go out there and take out a prominent leaker in the DNC, because the threat of that information getting out versus the threat of the information of this guy dying, it's actually worth it to them for this guy to not get this information out. It's actually worth it to them to eliminate him, even though it might even look like a cover-up. They know that they have the media operations behind them to therefore facilitate a cover-up narrative. So this is often the problem I have with these things, where people like to call people like me and people like other people that look into this, specifically the death of Seth Rich, they like to call us conspiracy theorists. But honestly, it's really just vetting a lot of information and realizing that the official narrative, if I don't agree with the official narrative, then all of a sudden I'm a conspiracy theorist just by the fact that I don't agree with the official narrative. And I just don't buy that slanderous form of criticism. I want the refutation. I want the refutation. I want the argument. I want the counter argument. And my counter argument, I feel like, holds way more water and has way more credibility and broad acceptance in a broad crowd of people that also agree that this was not a robbery. It was far from that. This was a murder. This was more than likely a hired gun operation. And so I want to throw this information at you guys, and hopefully there will be more information from this investigator, Ron Wheeler, and hopefully let's all pray for his safety, that he doesn't get whacked also for being a private eye looking into all this. And lastly, I also would just want to share with people exactly why private industry works much better than government when it comes to doing jobs such as these. You see this kind of information that this private investigator is uncovering, and you see, the ramifications of the information if it is proven to be true. And you also can see the cover-up happening within the DC police, and this all tying up with the timing of the FBI director being fired over, one of the reasons being this Russiagate, this Russian conspiracy that they've literally stood on top of as a support to open up investigation. And Trump has fired Director Comey partly for that reason. Now, I argue that reason has more to do with Seth Rich than it has to do with just fundamentally them trying to get Trump for being a Russian. I think Trump is playing the moves that he knows are on his table, and I also do believe that this was no coincidence that after this had happened, this private investigator came out with this information. So thank you all for watching this video, and I want to also make an announcement. Go follow my Patreon account, and yep, I just opened up a Patreon account, and I would love to see some people commit patron donations to me and support me in my endeavors to research and make independent research and investigative reports on a lot of these topics. And I want to thank you all for watching this, and please subscribe to my channel. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I actually believe at this point that I upload the video, I will be at 1,000 subscribers. So thank you all for watching. Go to my website, www.thelibertycolumnist.com, for more information and key articles that I've highlighted for people to read. All my videos are on there as well. Please go to that site, check it out, and look for more content to come. Thank you so much for watching.